There is a specific, gut-wrenching kind of tragedy in watching a masterpiece being whitewashed by the very hands that are supposed to protect it. What we witnessed in the Indiana Fever's victory over the Los Angeles Sparks was not just a basketball game, it was a feature-length documentary on institutional self-sabotage. The Fever won, the scoreboard ticked over to an 87-78 final, and yet, the prevailing emotion leaving the arena wasn't celebration. It was a cold, creeping sense of dread. It was the intellectual dissonance of seeing pure genius in the first quarter, only to watch that genius be handcuffed, slow-danced, and structurally dismantled by its own architect in the second half. We aren't just analyzing a box score today, we are dissecting a philosophy that is actively burning down the most valuable asset in the league to collect the insurance money. To understand the crime, you have to witness the beauty that existed before it. The opening 12 minutes of this game were a manifesto on how Caitlin Clark fundamentally warps the physics of a basketball court. There is a concept of gravity in sports, a magnetic pull that goes far beyond the stat sheet, and Clark's gravity is so dense that it doesn't just attract defenders, it consumes them. Early in the game, we saw a possession that defines her entire existence. Aaliyah Boston comes up to set a screen, and crucially, she holds it. She holds the screen long enough for the algorithm of chaos to compute. Clark uses the hesitation dribble, which is simply a courteous warning before an execution, and suddenly, the paint collapses into a singularity. Look at the freeze frame of that moment. It is visually absurd. 5, count them, 5 Los Angeles Sparks jerseys are completely sucked into the paint, orbiting around one player like moths around a blinding flame. This is not a common trapping defense, this is primal fear. No other player in the WNBA generates this level of collective panic. When the defense condenses into that tight a space, the floor doesn't just open up, it tears wide open. Clark recognizes the gravitational singularity and fires a laser to Sophie Cunningham. Cash. 3 points. That sequence is the platonic ideal of the Caitlin Clark system. It's fast, it's intuitive, and it relies on the defense's sheer terror of her shooting range. But here is where the narrative fractures, and this is the detail that reveals how the coaching system is unknowingly slashing its own tires. The goal, the desired outcome from the sideline, is not just that play. The mandate is the extra pass, the eternal one more swing. Now, on the surface, that sounds like beautiful, unselfish basketball. In reality, it's a bureaucratic tax on a natural disaster. Later in the game, we saw Cunningham catch a very similar kick-out pass. In a natural flow offense, she lets it fly. Instead, she heeded the mandate, drove a fraction of a step, and whipped it one more time to Kelsey Mitchell. Yes, it's a hockey assist. Yes, it's a nice gesture. But it's a sculpture that has been sanitized for safety guidelines. When you demand that the immediate, high-percentage shot be bypassed for the theoretical extra pass, you aren't refining the offense. You are siphoning statistical value directly out of your superstar's pocket. This isn't just about points, it's about neutralizing the organic, devastating momentum that Clark's instantaneous vision creates. A tap-in is being turned into a geometry problem, and it's being done on purpose. As the game wore on, the split personality of this Fever team became physically painful to watch. We entered a tale of two systems, and the shift was catastrophic. The first quarter was a rocket launch, an outpouring of physical evidence that when Clark pushes the pace and plays the role of the chaos engine, the Fever are unbeatable. She was racking up points and assists at a blistering rate, heading into the half with a double-double trajectory. Then, the second quarter hit. Then the third. Somebody flipped a switch, or more accurately, Stephanie White called a system change. The short Showtime Fever, the team that revolutionized the league just a season ago by playing with blistering pace, suddenly looked like they were stuck in mud. We moved away from the motion chaos where Clark dominates and dove headfirst into a stagnant, isolation-heavy grind. White deliberately took the ball out of the hands of the engine and put her in a corner, asking her to wait for handoffs. You cannot watch the sheer dominance of that first quarter system, a system that piled up 21 points of lead space, and then rationally decide to scrap it. You just can't. Which leads to the only logical, albeit terrifying, Conclusion: the divergence isn't a strategic error, it is an intentional philosophical power grab. It's a coach trying to force a square system into a round unicorn, strictly to prove that her system, and not the player's instinct, is responsible for winning. This artificial slowing of the game is a self-inflicted gunshot wound that the defense can't save them from. While the coaching staff is busy trying to micromanage every possession on the offensive end, the defensive reality of this team is a gaping, bleeding wound that they are simply hoping nobody notices. Looking at the box score summary, we see the mirage for what it is. Holding the Sparks to 78 points looks like a defensive victory on paper until you actually watch the Sparks play. They weren't held, they were just missing. The Sparks were misfiring on wide-open layups, bumbling out-of-bounds plays, and fumbling passes that had zero Fever defense in the vicinity. We are talking about Kelsey Plum, historically an 89% free throw shooter, missing free throws. The Sparks didn't just beat themselves, they held a masterclass in self-destruction. If the Sparks had hit even a measly 3 of their wide-open three-point attempts, this 9-point cruise turns instantly into an overtime dogfight. The Fever are a team that pours in 87 points, a total that usually guarantees a WNBA win, and yet, the win feels like a loss because the defensive philosophy is so porous that a high school-level shooting night from an opponent almost erased a 21-point lead. And let's be clear, we are not laying the collapse of this lead at Aaliyah Boston's feet. The rot set in long before any individual substitution. The run by the Sparks was well underway because the offensive scheme had already choked the life out of the team's momentum. The damage done by this slow-it-down philosophy doesn't just hurt the scoreboard, it physically drags down the stats of everyone not named Caitlin Clark, and even she is being artificially suppressed from greatness. Look at the tangible production. Points in the paint, the Fever, who came into this game leading the league, nearly averaging 62 points in the paint, were cut down to 36. Almost halved. That's not a slump, that's a schematic blockage of driving lanes. Fast break points? Forget it. The 2024 Fever taught the entire league to build rosters with speed. The Valkyries literally designed their expansion draft around playing the Fever's old style, and yet the Fever themselves have abandoned the racetrack for a tractor pull. And then there is the Clark statistical vacuum. Caitlin finished with 24 points and 9 assists, a night that looks gorgeous on paper, but it's a mirage of resilience. She got those numbers despite the system, not because of it. She ended the game with 6 turnovers, but if you truly trace the origin of those mistakes, 3 of them were directly due to teammates fumbling perfect passes or not being ready for the ball. Strip away the play-finishing fumbles, and she's sitting on a 3-turnover game. But more heartbreaking than that, she was robbed of the double-double. When Sophie Cunningham passed up that shot, the shot Clark's gravity created, for the hockey assist, Clark's dime vanished into the ether of the system. This is a player who could, if she simply said no more, lead the league in scoring. If she stopped passing to wide-open teammates who hesitate, she could average 30 points a game in her sleep. Instead, she plays the game the right way for 40 minutes, and her generosity is punished by a coaching mandate that actively deflates her numbers and dilutes her impact. This passive-aggressive offensive tweaking is now spreading a silent, corrosive decay through the rest of the supporting cast, creating a deep well of frustration that hasn't boiled over yet, but it's close. Let's look at Aaliyah Boston. She finished 0 for 3. I'm actually less concerned about the 0 points and more concerned about the process. When Boston is encouraged to demand the ball in the post, rather than step out and set the earth-shattering screens that unlock Clark's magic, you get a dysfunctional mess. If the coaching continues to indulge the post touch at the expense of the screen assist, Boston will continue to struggle, and the offense will remain clogged. It's the difference between feeding a player and feeding a system. Then there is the absolute vanishing act of Lexi Hull. 1 3-point attempt in 80 minutes of basketball across 2 games. This is a statistical siren. This is a player who led the league in 3-point shooting, and now she is a ghost who stands in the corner and watches the paint clog. Either she is battling an undisclosed injury, which is deeply concerning for the medical transparency of the team, or, more frighteningly, the coaching staff has told her to put the weapon away. You don't neuter a sniper unless you are trying to lose the war. Look at Monique Billings, who was put in positions to try and drive and playmake, leading to turnovers. It looks like chaos because it is. The offense has no identity because it has rejected the only identity that made it terrifying. In the end, this was a win that tasted like ash. The scoreboard says the Fever won by 9. My eyes watched them lose a 21-point psychological advantage and nearly choke against a team that couldn't throw a pea in the ocean. We have reached a breaking point in the narrative where blind loyalty to the coaching staff has to be questioned. You cannot slurp the Kool-Aid of a system that is actively extinguishing the brightest flame in the sport. You cannot look at a first quarter where the ball flies free and the points rain down, and then applaud a second half where the ball sticks and the lead evaporates. It isn't just about Caitlin Clark's stats being deflated, it's about the entire emotional energy of the squad being muted. The unselfish hockey assist is only unselfish if it's natural. When it's forced, it's just compliance. And right now, the Indiana Fever are compliantly marching toward mediocrity, while a generational talent checks the clock, hoping she'll eventually be allowed to play her game again. The warning lights are flashing. We're not blaming the players for the inherent flaws of a twisted philosophy. We're just watching a coach take a formula that changed the WNBA and set it on fire, all while saying she's fixing the fuel mixture. If this isn't corrected, that 21-point lead won't just shrink against bad teams. It will vanish completely against the great ones.